The honourable for Durham.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I stand in the House today in full support of Bill S-224 in its original form. I want to commend my colleague, the member from Oshawa, for his hard work, his tireless advocacy on behalf of human trafficking victims. I consider him to be a friend and a mentor, in addition to being my neighbor, and I have seen the hard work he has put in to fighting for victims of crime and trying to get all parties on board with a common sense idea to hold offenders who commit the crime of human trafficking to a higher standard than we hold the victims. Unfortunately, this bill has been attacked by the Liberal government with an amendment that not only hollows it out and guts it, but goes so far as to actually delete all of the contents of the legislation, making it meaningless and also making the bill ineffective in challenging the status quo. Unfortunately, this is on brand for the Liberal Party of Canada to disrespect victims of crime, to maintain a status quo of chaos and disorder, and not stand up for those who are suffering from the way the justice system currently operates. The Liberal Party of Canada does not support victims of human trafficking, just as they do not support victims of all crimes. It is not a government interested in serving the interests of law-abiding citizens, but is more concerned with being easy on criminals. Undermining Bill S-224 is completely on brand because we know how little they care about victims of crime. And I can go over the record. Liberal bail policies, for example, have turned courthouses into turnstile houses. Police officers work very, very hard in our communities to make arrests, to enforce the law, and to keep our communities safe, only to see those who they arrest released back into the community to commit the same crimes over and over again. Catch and release bail policies have contributed to a spike in all sorts of crimes across Canada, from auto theft to violent crime, and are contributing to a system of chaos and disorder. We have also seen the Liberal government's approach to enforcing drug laws. Certainly, Madam Speaker, you would recall that in British Columbia we saw the results of a sadistic experiment to legalize hard drugs, further promoting chaos and disorder. And of course, we have the judge shortage problem. We have seen that this government is not interested in appointing enough judges to ensure that we have a functional justice system. Long delays have caused cases of violent crime to be thrown out of the courts. And I ask anyone hearing my words, just imagine being a law-abiding citizen. You do everything that you've been asked to do. You go to school, you get a job, you pay your taxes, you contribute to this country. And a crime is committed against you or your family. The system that you pay into does not have your back. In fact, it is so ineffective that the person who committed the crime against you never has to face consequences for his or her actions. That is the system of chaos and disorder that we have under this Liberal government. Because again, it does not have the backs of law-abiding citizens. Instead, it is concerned with being easy on criminals. The system of chaos and disorder is the status quo under the current Prime Minister. And the reality is that by opposing Bill S-224, by putting forward an amendment that renders it absolutely meaningless, the Liberal government is clinging to the status quo. They are clinging to the chaos and disorder that they have caused. You know, the crime of human trafficking is a particularly heartbreaking one. It exploits the most vulnerable people in our communities. And for those of us from Ontario, it hits close to home. From 2012 to 2022, 2/3 of the human trafficking cases reported across Canada occurred in Ontario. The 401 highway corridor has become a hub for trafficking crimes, and it is fair for Canadians to expect some action from the government to address these concerns. We have heard from police officers who are frustrated with the status quo. Police officers who have said quite openly that it makes it harder for them to do their jobs. I'd like to quote a member of the Durham Regional Police Service, who I'm fortunate enough to say serves my home community of Durham. And the Detective Constable Jeff Tucker said, and I quote, "There is a lack of understanding for the victims. The victims are re-traumatized every time they have to testify over and over again. The criminal justice system provides more rights to the accused than the victims. Victims are not protected by the system, only criminals." This is a very serious problem, and it's not hard to see why police officers would be disappointed with the status quo that we have. Currently, under the law, only 8% of human trafficking offenders are convicted, and Bill S-224 in its original form sought to solve this problem. The justice system is broken, to put it bluntly, and it's not hard to figure out who is responsible. The Liberal Prime Minister, in power for 9 years, is responsible. Despite all his efforts to claim no responsibility for his own actions, he has broken the justice system, and a course correction is necessary. I would like to use my time to share the perspective of the mother of a human trafficking victim. Linda Harlos has been a champion for Bill S-224 in its original form. Linda is an advocate in the fight against human trafficking, the founder of the organization Parent with Purpose, where she's a sex trafficking and abuse prevention educator, and shares her story of being the mother of a sex trafficking survivor. Linda writes, "In the current global landscape, the question is not if a child will be targeted for exploitation, but when. We must ask ourselves, are our protocols robust enough to prevent them from becoming victims, and if they do, to ensure justice is served? Every night I lay my head on my pillow, tormented by the knowledge that my naivety led to my daughter's trafficking. Can you, as policymakers and leaders, rest easy without feeling shame or guilt, knowing that justice remains out of reach for her due to a lack of proof for her suffering? Was she expected to photograph the moment she was being waterboarded for not complying with a client's demands? Should she have documented her trafficker threatening her son's life as retribution for her refusal to allow further abuse? In a household of 3 women, 2 have endured repeated sexual assault, yet these incidents remain unreported. Why? Because we are painfully aware that current laws will re-victimize us without delivering justice. My daughter would willingly face re-victimization if there were any hope that justice would prevail. While local organizations excel at addressing victims' basic needs, they fall short in securing justice. The solution is straightforward. Punish those who exploit our children and the perpetrators who buy from them, not the victims. It is imperative that we strengthen our legal frameworks to protect and deliver justice for the most vulnerable among us. I thank Linda for her work and for her advocacy. I thank all of the people who stood up in support of victims of violent crime, including the member for Oshawa, who has been a tireless advocate. And I would say that members of this House have an important decision to make. Will they support Bill S-224 in its current form, in its original form, or will they allow a Liberal amendment to continue promoting chaos and disorder across our country? It should be a no-brainer. It should be very obvious that change is needed and that the course correction of this country is in the hands of its leaders to listen to the people of Canada. I leave that on the conscience of all members of this House, and I thank you for giving me the chance to speak in support of victims' rights. Thank you.